You need to install the Read Aloud Google Workspace add-on to read.
Hello, Deep Mindfulness Collective, reporting to you here from the void with a camera that has not yet turned on. Give me one sec here. See if we're getting somewhere eventually. Oh, camera's on, but the thing is not showing. Okay, folks, welcome, welcome, welcome. I promise the camera will eventually. Here we go. Look at that. Boom. Here we are. Folks, welcome. Get my self set up here. Folks, so great to be here with you. Very happy we get to practice together today, do a little meditation, and then afterwards I've got a big surprise for everyone, unless you read the description of the video. So the big surprise is that I am just back from a 3-day, feels like a 3-week, 3-month ayahuasca journey, and I'm going to share every bit about it. So it's going to be a somewhat longer video, but I want to make sure I have enough time to talk about everything that happened, share my experience, whether I recommend or don't recommend, whether I encourage or don't encourage, and the effect that it's had on me, which is profound. Honestly, it's like really profound. I've been doing quite a bit of different always guided plant medicine work this year, last 2 years really, and this is very, very significant. I've had a lot of big experiences, and this was like a different category almost. So I want to share that. I want to talk all about it, and but first, of course, we're going to meditate. Hit me in the chat real quick. This is if you're unfamiliar with this. So what we do, we just tell folks where we're at. And what are we grateful for? That's what I'm most grateful for. All of you. Holy crap. I'm so grateful to be here with you. Happy New Year 2022. Super exciting. I mean, this year is like, I'm not like a new numbers person, like one of those people who's like, oh, the date is this special date, but like, it's pretty crazy. Like all the dates are like so like weirdly synchronous, and like, I'm like, oh, I sent someone a date and it was like 1/1/22 and then 1/11/22, and it's like a lot of like really like, weird dates. What's up there? It's Cat Letterbox from Zurich. Grateful for nature. I love that. Thank you for that. I'm grateful for nature as well. Hey, Julia Temple, wonderful from Vienna, Austria. Grateful they built a new IKEA at the railroad station. That is very convenient. Aaron from Indiana, welcome. Great to see you. Grateful for my cats. That's lovely. I usually am not a big cat person, but this at the place that I was at, they had several just cats who were family, part of the community, and it was very sweet. There were some very sweet cats, and I sort of maybe changed my mind about cats. We had some really crummy cats when I was growing up, but maybe they were just poorly trained or poorly sort of socialized. Oh, cool KLM. Welcome. From South Carolina, grateful for children's ER doc on New Year's. Wow. Well, yeah, me too. I'm grateful they were there for you. Or maybe you're just grateful for them in general. I don't know if that's part of your personal story or not. but I am grateful that they're there as well. Anyone else? Anyone else joining us who'd like to let us know either that it's their first time here or that they are, grateful for anything? Let us know where you're at. What are you grateful for? We're going to meditate for 25 minutes. It's going to be a freestyle meditation. I kind of just want to do whatever I need, which is going to be probably heart practice based, something warm, because the experience was really, really warm and loving, and sort of finding a space in my heart that I didn't know was there, and like really realizing like how much like love and compassion are like this incredible place to, like this incredible gift and place to like reside. So that's probably what the practice will be about for 25 minutes, and then I will give a full download of my meditation experience. They call it a meditation actually, but yeah, so the 3-day very intensive, very awesome ayahuasca experience. So anyone else want to jump in and say hi? We're going to meditate here for 25 minutes, so I'm going to encourage you to keep the body relatively still, but I do want you to listen to the body. That was a central theme in this journey, was listening to the body, seeing what it needs. So if it needs to adjust, you can go ahead and do so. Just do so really mindfully. Stillness is a tool, but movement is a tool as well. We don't want to get convinced that stillness is the way to freedom. Okay, folks. So find that nice, comfortable position that you can maintain. If you can, sit at the edge of whatever cushion you're at. A big download in this journey that just occurred was this thing around... this is going to sound so cheesy, and just know that I'm fully skeptical. I'm not like one of these people who's just like throws terms like this around willy-nilly, but just this idea of like energy in the body. And just I can talk about what I mean by that, or like what's meant, but I literally mean like, if you don't eat for a long time, you're like low energy. That's what I mean. So as we're getting ready for this practice, we're going to be sitting in stillness. So just take a minute to kind of like move the body a little bit, like welcome wise seclusion. Welcome back. Just in a sense, jiggle the body a little bit to get a little bit of sort of move things around. I'm now way more in tune with my body, which is one of my big sort of things going into that I really wanted to have like more clarity around just what the body needed and caring for it as I'm, aging, and COVID got me way more sedentary than I had wanted to be. Whatever will help sort of move things around to settle the body, and then finding a nice comfortable position. Wise seclusion, you might have missed. I also want to know what you're grateful for. If you don't mind, you don't have to, but I'm glad to see you're back. And when you're ready, I can tell you're not ready. You're almost ready. We'll begin. I would mention, set the intention now of how long you want to meditate for, because if you leave that decision for the meditation, the likelihood that you'll just decide in a weird way is very high. So go ahead and figure out, do I want to stay for the whole practice, or do I want to bounce part way? And then stick with that decision. Grateful for insight. Lovely. Well, let's do a little insight meditation right now. Find that nice, comfortable position. Excuse me. And when you're ready, we will begin. Beginning by taking a few comfortable deep breaths, just feeling the body. rise and fall. Take the kind of deep breaths that will lift the whole body. Hold for a few moments, and then release. There's an incredible power to slowing the breath down, smoothing the breath. This can change the way the entire nervous system is functioning. Slowing the breath, pausing, and then breathing out. Sweeping through the body to be sure we're not holding any undue tension. Starting at the top of the head, relax the brow. Relax the muscles behind the eyes so deeply that you can feel that relaxation in the face. Let that relaxation spread to the jaw, letting the jaw fall open and relaxing the back of the tongue all the way down into the throat. Let the back of the tongue relax so deeply that you can relax the neck and throat. And let that wash into the shoulders. Relax the arms so deeply it might feel like you're tossing the flesh away from the bone. And as you find the hands, recognizing there are lots of micro tensions in the hands we don't attend to, so let go very deeply in the hands. Letting go of any attempt to control the breath, just letting the body breathe as it will. Noticing the natural tightening and relaxing of the upper chest and upper back as the breath comes and goes. If at any point we're struggling or feel overwhelmed, we can re-engage the slow breath to calm the nervous system down. Relaxing the lower belly so deeply that it can be felt in the hips. Relaxing the lower back so deeply that it can be felt in the upper legs. Relaxing the knees and the calves. The ankles, and relaxing the feet. And now tuning into relaxation in the whole body as one collective. We sometimes hear this idea to let go. Much of what is simply meant there is to physically let go at a level that is beyond what you can even physically feel. So let go of the body. Physically relax the entire body more deeply than you can even feel. as though if you let go deeply enough, the body itself would evaporate, atomize. Feel as though you are resting in the body like a comfortable lounge chair. Go ahead and feel yourself resting in this warm, generally pleasant space, this body. Like it's a comfy chair enveloping us. I'd like you to imagine that behind you, the sort of cushiony space around the body, this is part of this imaginary chair that we're laying in. It's sort of fluffy nature, letting ourselves rest in that soft, cushiony space. I'd like you to attend to that space as a welcoming space. Meaning recognizing its welcoming nature. The space behind us, like many experiences, it doesn't need anything from us. Internally, we might have worries, to-do lists. We might be judging how the meditation is going, but the space behind us doesn't have those things. So resting in this space that doesn't need anything from us, doesn't need anything from the world. And recognize that this welcoming nature is so kind. It's so kind of this space to not need anything from us. A space where we can rest. If you've done this practice with me before, you know it's okay to open up to all space in the same way, but right now we're simply talking about this space behind us, the space that we can feel the body rest into. Feel free to open up if you'd like, but also feel free to just stay with the simplicity, leaning on this cushion of awareness. Feeling the luxury of a place that doesn't need anything from us, doesn't need the world to be different. In that way, it's compassionate. It holds us and cares for us just the way we need to be cared for, without any expectation. if we can't find that, if we feel like that's just a sort of fantasy or idea, we don't have a visceral contact, see if you can switch to the sensations of the body rather than the image created by the mind. Almost as though the body didn't have a head perspective, it's just body. Resting physically releasing the muscles throughout the body, but in particular in the back of the body, on the sides of the body. Letting the edge of where the body feels like it is, letting it sort of melt into that cloud of awareness. Using what might feel like our periphery rather than the laser point of the mind. Feeling that space behind us squeeze us, like this perfect comfy chair, but almost like a being. Almost like it has a personality that simply is welcoming. Often in our lives we're confused, challenged, alone. But as strange as this might sound, feeling into that space as though it were a companion. Perhaps at first hard to recognize, but ultimately compassionate and welcoming. Even if it's hard to recognize. Let the space that is behind you, let it merge with the body. Let those two become one space. Or at least spaces with soft borders, or spaces that mix. If it feels relieving, being in contact with a space that doesn't need anything from us, soak into that. This is the relief of care. Being cared for just as we are, without any need or expectation. Anytime you find that you're in contact with anything that I've described, let's label that in the mind. Let's give it a title. And we're going to label that with a statement. And the statement will simply be thank you. Thank you. So we're not just repeating the phrase over and over, we're looking for that contact, the spaces melding, the sense of care, or even just the neutrality. A space that doesn't ask anything of us. When we have contact with that, we label it with thank you. Allowing ourselves to have gratitude as a kind of label of that experience. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. If it helps to add a ultra subtle smile, one so subtle that someone observing might not even notice a change in the shape of the face. Beginning to let the front of the body melt into this space as well. As though this kind awareness is beginning to pass through the entire body. The whole body is resting in it. Thank you. Thank you. And what if this kind awareness were truly a guide in our lives? A kind of personality that could show us a path to freedom. Like a best friend or caretaker. A loved one we could rely on. A home, but one that is like a friend. If we had someone like that with us to care for us all the time, how much could we let go physically into that space? what if this being, this kind awareness, we describe our experience as being, true being, but what if it was like a being? And it would guide us by showing us moments when we felt connected with it, moments when we felt disconnected. And the being itself was showing us a path to the freedom, to the peace that it offers. So let the term we've been using to label this, let it flow in all directions as though it were simply being heard everywhere, passing through all space in front of us, around us, through the body, through the mind. And perhaps we can even hear it without needing to say the words in the mind. So that we're hearing the silent intention echoing throughout this space. And then transitioning our term, our phrase, simply to a global, I hear you. I hear you. Speaking to this being. And after we say the phrase, I hear you, receive the phrase. We don't need to say it, just feel the echo within the system of having just said and meant the phrase. Reaching out, saying, I hear you. Then being heard, being felt, being seen. As we begin a relationship with a kind of being that is so powerful. It's networked right into our nervous system, right into our mind and body. I see you. And without ending the practice, staying with the practice. Breathing in just the right way to serve the body. Filling the body, letting the body stretch with the breath. Letting the breath mix with our friend, our companion, our guide. And staying with the practice, staying in stillness, allowing a tiny bit of light to enter the eyes. Eventually allowing the eyes to rest on a single point as they fully open. Letting the space of seeing mix with the space of the body, space of awareness. I see you. And in this way, allowing this particular moment to be the great teacher, the one we've been finding contact with. Let this moment show us how we could bring this practice into every aspect of our life. Okay. Do a little stretch if you like. Ooh. All right. Thank you. Wise seclusion. Thank you very much. So, let me know what that was like, and I'm going to ask you, if you can, let me know immediately, because I have a sort of limited time to talk about everything I want to talk about, and I want to answer any questions or hear any reports. So hit me with your reports. What was that like? What happened? What do you like now? Hopefully that was fun and interesting. I'll talk about it more in a minute, but a lot of the journey was around this sort of recognizing the sense that there was an entity or a being that was there guiding the process. It's very weird, but that's what happened. So don't give me any guff. Let's see. Okay. Should we do Discord? I guess we'll do Discord. If anyone wants to chat, usually people don't jump on Discord, but I'll just make sure real quick. If anyone has a report that they want to give, wants to jump on Discordio, we can do that. And for now, just let me know. Use those digits and hit me. Hit me. Beep, 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 beep. I'm looking for this and this. And oh my god, I've been here the whole time. I've been here for days. What the hell? Or did I just double click so oh, I see. Cool. There we go. Okay, excellent. So I'm in Discord if anyone wants to chat there. Okay, hit me with reports, folks. So I'm going to jump in a minute and give my whole report in great detail. And we'll go from there. Off topic, how does one go about going to an ayahuasca retreat? Well, that's a great question. One of the best pieces of advice that someone gave me was start interacting with your local psychedelic community. That's what I would recommend. There are also, often if you start asking people who've done it before, they can talk to you about specifics on like where they went or what they suggest, but because it's still underground, like no one can really like in this forum, I couldn't talk about anything in detail or like people or who to contact or whatever. If someone was like a friend, I could talk to them about it, but like beyond that, I can't really like, disclose. But you just basically have to like get in a place where it's like you're in a comfortable, trusting connection with somebody who has that connection. They can talk about it. There are also probably forums I would recommend. If you can travel, you can definitely, there's wonderful places in Peru. The tradition I was in was the Shipibo tradition. Very cool. I'm fully enamored with this community, this way of practicing, this like relationship to the medicine. It's very cool. So you can probably look that up and find out, a little more about that. I'll talk about it in a minute though, but I think the marketing on ayahuasca is extremely bad. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay. Let's get set up here. Any other reports, meditation reports, before we start talking about the main topic here? Okay. Great. Okay. So just so folks know, okay, beautiful, thanks. Thank you. So just so folks know, what I'm going to do is during this section, I'm going to turn off the chat. That is not because I don't want you to be asking questions or, I actually really want to hear your questions. But this is basically me recording the video, which is going to be it's standalone video. So it'll seem like I'm not thinking about you or interacting with you. Maybe it won't, but I'm going to turn the chat off, is all I mean. Long walk, small drink of water. I'm going to turn the chat off. So hit me any reports from that meditation, and then we'll go from there. Nothing? No one? That's odd, but okay. I'll live with it. Okay, so folks, this is how it's going to go. I'm going to go through a few different sections here. I want to talk about like the entire arc of everything. Here are my sections. I'm just going to tell them to you right away. Okay. I'm going to wait one more second for reports, and then I'm going to turn the chat off. So my editor can have a free blank space to work with. Okay. Boom. Here we are. Let's make sure we're good. Okay. Okay, so this is the full report from my experience with ayahuasca. It was a 3-day, very, very powerful, very, very moving experience, and I wanted to share it with all of you. I want to start off by saying that I do not recommend that anyone use any medicines or substances or anything that they are not personally very comfortable with. They haven't gone through all the necessary sort of medical and psychological checks that are needed. So I'm not recommending anything. I'm going to talk about my personal experience, and if that feels compelling for you, then you can, do the research and check out, get your own resources safely that work with you. So the first thing I want to talk about is the general bad press that I think ayahuasca has and that I walked into this experience with. I went in very nervous. I was like, oh my God, this is going to be the most intense thing in your life. You hear people saying like there's going to be vomiting and stuff. And like compared to what actually occurred, that is so insanely different than what it actually is. It's just like, it's hard to even think of an analogy. It's like someone saying like, oh, football, oh yeah, that's that thing. It's like, I'm going to describe it to you. There's like a hot dog and there's like some spilled beer. That's what football is. It's like, whoa, like this is some confusing, this is not how it actually is. So first is the bad press. I wanted to start from here. If I were to give a framework to understand this, imagine that there was a kind of best friend that you either haven't seen in a really long time or it's been so long, or childhood best friend, and you see them again and it's like the old feelings are completely back. It's not like sometimes I see childhood really good friends that I'm like, I don't know who you are, and we're just, I don't know anymore. But like you see them and the full connection is there, just completely connected. And imagine that you had like a best friend or a good friend, another good friend who's like really, really creative and is just like wildly, like they're just like pure creation. I'm sure everyone has a friend like that. I have several. I went to art school. And then you have another friend who's just unbelievably compassionate. They're just so gentle and compassionate and caring in this way. And then imagine like that friend is like a caretaker and can like take care of you in this way. The experience feels like a personality, and it's very hard to get across that this is what people say, and I've heard it, but it just sort of went over my head, or just sort of like, okay, it feels like someone, but it feels like a person. It feels like a being that is there with you and that's guiding the process. I only do guided psychedelic work. I've been sober for coming on 18 years, and it's just not in the cards for me to like do recreational, psychedelic stuff. I just work with guides. And of course there's the guides that were there that facilitated, but they were, they were not anywhere near as dominant as the experience of the guide that was the medicine itself. And it feels like a personality, someone I got to know and someone I spent some very serious time with that I can feel in my experience right now. if you do the meditation that is related to this recording that I just did, it was an introduction to guiding towards that, even if you haven't, experienced the medicine, because I think we all have this within us. So that is the sort of experience that it is. And also, like, if one chose to do this, you'd want an expert guide. You'd want someone who's done this hundreds of times, who's, very comfortable with the situation, who knows how to help people, do things, this kind of thing. My expectations going in, sorry, let me, oops, here we go. Why is this? Okay, come on, back to center. Okay. My expectations going in were, like I mentioned, sort of scary, and I was like, oh, what's going to happen, etc. And it was so the opposite of that, where I just felt completely cared for. And, they give everyone more or less the same amount of the medicine, and the medicine will adjust and be like, nope, you need it really, really quiet. And the first 2 nights were very quiet, and it was just about building trust with the medicine. And I took the same amount the third night, which was like all the fireworks. So if you want to hear the section about all the fireworks, that's later on. Go ahead and jump to that section in the recording, or so the setting was very beautiful. It's also really, really helpful and powerful, because it really is about these sort of details that we think, it doesn't really matter, but it really does. There's a tree you can look at that's beautiful. There's the sky that you can look at that's beautiful, and it really helps. And then there's the music and the tradition. And I really recommend people do this in the most traditional way that you can, because it seems like a silly factor, but it's doing it within a community of people who've dedicated their lives to this for generation after generation. It's like, there's something incredibly powerful about that people who just, their entire way of being, their language is literally structured around this process, to the point where, like, the way they speak is meant to actually be structured around these processes. The music, the sort of, the way it's set up, the timing, everything. So highly recommend to encourage people to do it in the most, traditional setting that is possible, whether that's in the United States or whether you actually travel to Peru or, I guess, Colombia as well. I'm sure there are other places that do that. The next thing I want to address is this idea of purging, and people talk about, there's vomiting and stuff, and I always thought that what they meant was you take the medicine and it's so yucky that you throw up, and it's like, that's just not the case. It's very rare that people take the medicine and it causes them to throw up. And of course you don't eat beforehand, because if your stomach's full, you'll be like all gurgly and whatever, and it absorbs the medicine. So, excuse me. It absorbs the medicine. So what is occurring here is what they call purging, but purging almost should be just termed like moving energy. So purging could be anything from, like, sort of like shaking the body to, like, move the sensations in the body around. It could be like suddenly the body, like, decides to shiver on its own, or yawn, right? And many of these are triggering the vagus nerve, which is actually calming the system down. So it's actually sort of on a nervous system level processing things along. So this concept of moving energy is very important in this tradition. And if you're a skeptical person like myself, 2 things. One, know that I'm skeptical, and I'm not just like, oh, magic energies, that's not my thing. And then 2, my best advice in this scenario is to try to just put the analytic part aside and just be like, sure, we're moving energies, fine. Because that's just what I did, and it served me incredibly well. And I could tell if I was just like overthinking it, it just wouldn't have worked as well. Fine, we're in a tradition that talks about moving energies. Maybe it's just the, foil to talk about something that's happening psychologically or psycho-emotionally. Fine. But they talked about this thing of, like, move the energy, and they talked about, like, riding the medicine. Like, don't lay down for the first big chunk of, like, hour and a half, like, sit up, because if you're laying down, like, the energy can get really stagnant and stuck. And I'll talk about that later. It completely happened to me. And then there's this thing about the like whatever's happening, moving the energy. And so the purging is the energy moving, and people just describe this thing of like, oh, there's something like, there's like something in my stomach and it turned into this like pain, or there's something in my shoulder, there's like, this sort of like sadness or something. And then I like started moving it, or I was listening to the music and like moving with the music, which is a lot of what you're supposed to do, is like move with the music, connect with the music, let that guide the experience. And they just suddenly find themselves like, burping or yawning or crying or throwing up. And so there is, everyone gets a little pail that you can throw up in if you need to. I don't think most people use it, but there's this moment where it's like, this has to exit my body. And I was sort of, for the first night and a half, was sort of like proud. It's like, I don't need to vomit. I'm good. I can kind of metabolize whatever discomfort I have, or if there's nausea or something. But keep in mind, you're not I've said this before, you're not throwing up the medicine. It's like the body is like, move this thing along. And there's a fair amount of actual research that shows that like the Stephen Levine sort of school of psychology, where it's saying like the body is actually holding trauma, and so we're actually trying to physically move the body and get it to like shake the material out of these stuck places. So one of the forms that can take is occasionally throwing up. And another form it can take is any other sort of way that the body is sort of moving things around itself. So the first 2 days were very similar, and so I'm going to bunch those two together because they had a very similar vibe. The intensity was very low. I took the same amount of medicine all 3 nights, and my intention going in was like, please let this be gentle. Please let me build a relationship with the medicine, like help it be easy and kind. I really needed gentleness and kindness, and the medicine answers. This is another thing that I want to point out, is that something someone told me going into this is, more than any other psychedelic, the sense that there is a guide there, that there is a kind of entity that you can reach out to who will hear you, is so palpable. And you can just say, hey, will you help me with X? And they will. It won't necessarily be the way you think it is. It won't necessarily be like last for hours. It can last for a few seconds, but they will often answer the request. So the intentions that I set going in weren't really intentions, they were requests. And the request that I had, let me look at this now. Yeah. Okay, so the request that I had going into this was, please help me trust my body. Trust and feel safe in my body, knowing that this is where a lot of the emotional and traumatic experiences are held. I've found that over the years I've been relatively alienated from my body. I've sort of became a meditation teacher, and meditation has been the most helpful thing in my life in terms of working through a lot of this stuff. And it's a very sedentary occupation, or at least until now. I feel like I want more movement in my life now, but that's a lot of what it was to trust the body, to feel safe in the body. Over time, over the course of the 2 nights, it was also to allow any part of myself, like from an IFS, internal family systems therapy perspective, any sub-self, any little child that feels scared, or any part that feels like anxious or anything like that, to trust the body, to feel safe, to feel comforted, and to feel okay. And the first 2 nights were basically just like this incredibly sublime, gentle, spacious holding of my experience that were just this soft container that was in. Of course, there were moments that were intense and like intensely beautiful, and intensely like emotion would arise, but I just kept coming back to this experience, slowing my breath down, feeling the body like letting go behind me. It felt like letting go behind me and letting this sort of entity hold my experience. Okay, let me read my my thing from night 2, because I have like each thing has its like stuff. Give me a second here, and the fireworks are coming, I promise. Ginger for night 2, blah blah blah. Oh yeah. So another part of night 2 was that if any hard emotions come, allow me to feel them. Allow me to feel them as though that part that's feeling them is not alone. Because that was one of the things that I noticed from the first night, is that I would be feeling the body and be feeling like very transcendent and peaceful, and then all of a sudden my mind I'd be like, I don't know what's going on, and it would be painful and emotions, and I'd be like, oh, that's the perspective of my mind, meaning like from behind the eyes. And then I'd switch back into just like a raw body awareness, which is, you can define awareness as including as part of the mind, but it was like a physical felt experience, and it'd be like, oh, what a relief. And then suddenly my mind would be like, wait a minute, what about that? And it would be painful again. And I'm really starting to see that so much of my experience of suffering, and probably other people's experience of suffering, has to do with the mind view, which is this sort of like self perspective of like what's happening, and it's trying to figure things out and manage things, and that's really can be incredibly painful. So it was just trusting the body, experiencing the body from this experience, any pain or anything from the experience of the body. And when I did that, it was just like transcendent and like peaceful. Even though there'd be like big emotions happening, all this stuff, it'd just be like such an incredible relief. So, okay, let me just give me a second here to load up what I'm about to say. Okay. So on the second night, there was the experience. Let's see here. So on the second night, I'm there, I'm feeling this stuff, and all of a sudden this song comes on that's really energetic, really intense, and it also had all these weird time changes in it, which were like really unexpected, and things are like passing through you. Things like hit you and like move through the body in this way that's like not usual. It's like I hate to say energetically, but god damn it, there's really no other way to describe this, but it just feels like it can just pass through the body. And so like listening to the music, it was sort of going on, and this song comes on and is suddenly like very beautiful and powerful. And the person next to me is sometimes a guide there. And it was sort of like a very kind person sitting next to me. It felt like this very brotherly, sort of kind, compassionate person. We talked a bit before outside of the journeys, and he sort of gets up on his knees and starts singing this song, and that like really affected me, because it's sort of like it was like this person that I was like sort of with in the journey suddenly becomes this song. And he's a facilitator, he knows these foreign lyrics, these Shipibo lyrics, and he's singing this like really intense song, and something about that just released something inside of me, and I'm like, I was like, I have to throw up. So this is the first time I threw up in the first like 2 nights, and I go and I like throw up like a tiny bit, just like there's barely anything there to throw up, but I dry heave and like throw up a little bit, and I'm just like, clearly something's like moving through. And then again, this sort of music like hits in this big wave, and there's this big emotional release, and I just start like weeping. There's a lot of weeping in this journey, and I'm weeping into the pillow, I'm crying, and there's this whole arc of realization of like, I felt really, really alone as a kid. There were times when I just felt so alone, and it felt like this thing of being like, a kid in the crib and being like alone and like crying and like no one coming, like, crying. And then there's a sudden moment where I was like, was I crying or was I silent? And like sort of like remembering both, which I'll bring up later. And there was this, all of a sudden there's like, all this like deep pain was happening, and I remembered the thing of like feeling it but not feeling alone. So suddenly it like felt like I was enveloped and like was being held while this like really intense pain was happening, and that would come and go. There were times when I felt really like alone. And then it went through this cycle of different things of like, the loss of my relationship was just really important to me. It's the most important relationship of my life, lost, during COVID. Mourning that, and then going back to like this feeling of like, it was really unfair that I had that experience as a child. Of course, it's probably very common, but it just felt, and I experienced it as being unfair. And then my mind kind of swept through all the people that, from all the defensiveness and like that pain that I've harmed in my life. And it was really profound to see how that had showed up in all these little like interactions where I was like, like agitated or like had a hard time, and like those experiences, and going through all of those. And there was a sense of like, I felt so alone, and like realizing that child felt alone. It's not really me, it's that part that felt so alone. And suddenly it like something switched and clicked. And it was very interesting, because I was crying in this very like intense way, and it just switched into being like laughing. And this realization hit me all at once that I was like, crying and laughing are really, really similar. And I was like, the only difference between the two seems to be in one, I feel alone. And suddenly I realize I'm not alone. And it's fucking hilarious. And I was like, ha ha, ha. I was like a crazy person, but everyone's a crazy person at this thing. And I was like, I couldn't believe, I was like, this is hilarious. I thought I was alone. And I could feel the presence of the medicine supporting me. I could feel the sort of myself with this child that was like, had been lost, like all this stuff, like all these different, the people all together, the music, the sort of support. And I was like, oh my God, I feel not alone. And if you followed any of these, my psychedelic reports, the feeling of being existentially alone is at the core of what feels like my wounding. I don't know anything else that's a lower level than that, than just like I am alone and the pain that comes from that. And I realized in that, maybe in that moment, but in that day, that there's like, it's like alone, I'm alone. And then the mind tries to go, why am I alone? And it goes, oh, because you're sort of worthless. You must be, that's why you're alone, because you're not a good person. So then there's the shame on top of that. Then there's the protective layers on top of the shame, which is just like judgment. It's saying, yeah, you're bad, right? This other part that says you're bad, and if I judge you enough, you'll go away, you'll disappear, shame. And then on top of that is this sort of like arrogance that's like you're bad, and it's like an externally facing like judgment. And then, you know, it's like all these layers, right? And you go all the way down, you find this aloneness, and there's this switch that happened where it's just like, existentially, I'm connected, I'm okay, I'm safe. Very, very powerful. And that was basically what occurred in night 2. There's one other thing, but I'll talk about it in terms of night 3, which is where all the fireworks happen. So let me quickly go over what I'm about to say for night 3. Thank you guys for being here. It's really fun to tell you guys this story. It's like very powerful. Okay. Okay. So night 3. I go into night 3 with this incredibly soft, gentle, not feeling alone, feeling safe, held by the medicine. And I'm like, more of that, please. I want more of that. And that was my intention. I want more. I want that to be more secure. And I'm nervous that if I really go into like intense emotion or really intense weeping, that I'll get spun off into like feeling really alone again, because that's happened in other psychedelic journeys where it didn't feel so guided by the medicine. So I'm like, oh, I don't really know if I want to go into that. And of course it's scary because it's emotional. And so I go into this, the night 3 with this clear intention, except it's like, I'm really foggy. I'm really like, there was the first 2 nights, it was really foggy. And then the fog cleared and it felt like it just went into me, because I was like, I couldn't stick with my attention. My concentration was like totally lost. I'd stick with it for a minute and I'd just be like, what? And be worried and like really in my head. And I was like, oh man, like, have I lost the thing that, you know, took night after night to like connect with? So whatever, I'm practicing. And there's this thing that happened on night 2 that was clear, but then it really happened here, where suddenly I had this like really pleasant, like I was like sitting there trying to like kind of get into it. And an hour or so into the journey, maybe 2 hours, there was a sense of like this incredible soft sensation that just lay down, just take a nap. It's like so tranquilizing. And I was like, oh, it feels so good. And I was like, but they recommended to not lay down for the first, you know, section of the practice, to let the energy move. But it's like, but the impulse is so intense to lay down. And I was sort of like laying down and like laying there, and I realized suddenly, it's like, this is depression. This is the same sensation as depression. And that's something I don't really talk about that much, but I've had depression off and on for like a long time in my life. I didn't realize that's what it was. I thought I was just stuck. I was sort of like paralyzed and like, oh, I can't really do anything. I'm just sort of here on the couch or here, you know, stuck in a position. But looking back, I realized like it was depression. And it's happened all throughout my life. And meditation's been the biggest probable thing that has helped with that. And then maybe IFS and, you know, recovery has been really instrumental in sort of setting the groundwork. So I was like, this is what depression feels like. And I was like, it is an energy in my body. It is a physical like weight that like tells my body to like lay down. And so I was like, okay, I gotta do something. And I couldn't. I was like, I don't want to move. And they recommended listen to the music. So I listened to the music, and I just started kind of like moving my hands like with the music as I'm laying there. And like suddenly I'm like, okay, I have the energy. And like I get up and I'm on my knees and I'm just like really like moving my body, shaking, like trying to like shake off this heavy, dense energy. And it's sort of like a fight, and I'm like, get off of me. Like, I don't want this anymore. And there's a real like struggle there. And this is an ongoing process, so it goes on for quite some time. And then I'm, really moving to the sound of the music because it's really like helping like move the energy around. And at some point, I'm basically like full on ecstatic dancing because I'm just like, get this material out of me. And then and then I'd feel free when that heaviness would go away. And was one person there who had this just like very angelic singing voice. Everyone said the same thing. Your voice is angelic. It was very, very beautiful. And I guess I didn't expect that not only was the experience going to be like, intense and maybe there would be some singing, but the people who are leading would be these like really, really good musicians and like doing these like complex 3-part harmonies and, all these very interesting instruments. It's very beautiful. And so I'm moving in this way and I'm moving along, and this person has this angelic voice is sort of walking around, sort of doctoring people. Like someone needs something and she'll sing to them in this way that's, moves something along. And I'm sitting there, my eyes are closed, I'm moving, and it's very clear she's standing at the front of my mat and she's singing to me. And she's singing in the song she was actually singing. They sung it from many traditions, not just Shipibo. They sung, songs from Judaism and songs from Christianity and songs from just all over. And at that moment, she was singing a song about like the love of Christ. I forget what it was, but it's a very beautiful song. And she's singing really directly to me, and it cuts through me. And I feel this like incredible love from this person. And there's also this sort of like weird like moment of being like whether it's real or not, like this figure, this person, Jesus, like he believed in all of his heart that he was dying for me. And I was like, ugh, like I just like fell on my knees and like started weeping, and it was just like, it was so, so beautiful. And the experience was like, it was just moving this thing out of me that was like it needed to weep. But what was really interesting was that the intense feeling actually was like, no, like do not give me love. Like do not love me. It hurts way too much. And there's a sense of like, if I receive love, there's all this danger and stuff stuck with it. It's like scary and painful, and like, this almost like bad things will happen if I receive the love. And so it's just like receiving that, and then it was like really weeping, like sort of, I was weeping to the pillow to like keep it quiet, because you try to be somewhat respectful because everything you're doing is affecting everyone around you. And if you're too loud, they ask you to go to the other room. So I'm weeping and going along here, and then she kneels down and is like singing over me in this way, and it like opens something else up, and I'm just like viscerally screaming, like couldn't tell which way is up and down, like screaming, and into the pillow. And she touches me, and she's like, would you like to go to the other room? And I was like, yeah, like knowing that, in the other room you can just be as loud as you want, you don't have to worry about the people around you, etc. There's a few spaces like that. You can go outside, you can go whatever, and you would occasionally hear someone outside like screaming at the top of their lungs or whatever, because there's something they had to get out or whatever. And it was always so relieving, because it seems like that would be crazy and seem weird, but it's like this very human, warm sense is like all around you, and then somebody like lets something go, and you're like, it like moves something in you. So it was, people later said there's a big gift for them to hear me weeping, which I was one of many people who wept, but especially a lot of the people who are male presenting or male identifying were like, that was really helpful. And so I go to this other room, and this is sort of where I feel like some of the biggest stuff happens. So I go to this other room, I'm weeping into the pillow, and at some point I'm like, there's something wrong, like it's stopping the sort of energy, this thing from coming out. And so and also I couldn't breathe. That's an extra factor. And so like I take the pillow away and start like weeping, not with the pillow, but it's like, oh my God, it's so loud. Like this is just like, I can't hear it. And whenever I have like a bout of like weeping or really processing emotion that way, I usually do it into a pillow, because I have neighbors and I feel self-conscious, and I don't want to be heard, which is an important theme that comes up. I don't want to be heard. If I'm heard, it'll be bad. If someone hears me crying, that is a bad thing. So I go and I start like, weeping. And one thing to remember is that whenever you go into the other room or any of these other side rooms, they call them the VIP lounge, so people don't feel bad for going to the other room. Whenever you go into the VIP room, someone is there who's one of the sort of assistant guides just with you the whole time, like sort of tending to you. So I'm there, very kind woman who is there, like really intense energy, but also very loving energy. And I'm crying, and so like the sound is so loud. I'm like, oh, this is so loud. So I plug my ears, and I'm still like crying like at full volume. And suddenly this image flashes of that I mentioned before, which is like being an infant, being in the crib and crying, and then I was like, it hits me, I was like, I was terrified of my screams. I could like remember being an infant screaming and being like, this horrible sound is happening, like what is this terrifying sound? And it was scary, and a sense of like, it was scary all around me, like that's why I was like so scared. But the screaming was also terrifying, and I was like, what the hell is going on? Like really scared, and and that there's a long piece of that just moving through that. And then at some point I got hit with this wave as I'm laying there on the cushion, hit with this wave of that tranquility again. And I was like, oh, like I can rest. And I realized as an infant, whether this is real or just how my psyche is reconstructing it to make sense of it, as an infant, I realized that's where I learned this. That's where I learned to shut down the emotion, was this sort of like heavy energy. And so I would just, this heavy energy would hit, and I'd be like, no one's coming, so I'm just going to use this. And it would just be like, oh, I can rest. And it was restful. It felt like it would pin my body down, and I was like, okay, I can't move. And I realized that depression was this sort of like, it was a moment later, but I realized, oh, that's like a maternal caring like energy to make you stop feeling the extreme distress. I was like, holy shit. So it felt like very, relieving in that way. And I was like, oh, relieving. And I was like, but I don't want this anymore. I don't want to need this anymore. And so it calmed me down, but there's still this sort of like thing of like what needs to be expressed, etc. And I went back to the other room, and there was also this awareness that there was a kindness to this thing that I had been sort of trying to fight off. And so I like was more like thankful. I was like, thank you so much for this, but I need to move on. I need to let go of this experience. And so, I'm there, and I'm processing through this. And there was basically there was this. Let's go back here. Basically, there was this sense of a kind of like, this was like a protective energy. The problem, or not the problem, but what happened though is that as the night ends, I have this feeling that this was bad. Something was really wrong here. Like it was good the first 2 nights, but this was bad, and actually this whole situation was kind of bad. And I was like, I don't want to have that experience. I don't want to walk away from here thinking this was bad. But that's like where it sort of ended up. And it was like everywhere I looked, every sensory experience I looked at was like, this was bad. But there were all these really powerful experiences that happened before. So I'm going to come back to that, because that sort of comes to a conclusion to some degree the next morning. But during the journey, a couple other things happened. There was a couple moments where I was like moving to the music, etc., and I had this sense of there was the medicine wasn't guiding me anymore, and I was like, I need a guide. Like, what's happening? I feel lost. I feel, and there was a sudden realization, and the whole thing turned around to me, and it was just like, you're the guide. And it was this sort of like leadership position that while I find myself in a leadership position all the time, I had never felt it at this level. And it was like, you're the guide. You don't need a guide. It's you. And it wasn't egotistical, and it wasn't like narcissistic or anything like that. It was very, very empowering. And it's like, oh my God. And like, then I started like dancing like really crazy and like really moving to the music in this way that was like really powerful. And it was just like, I've got this. I'm good. And there was, I think it was like a level of like not needing something from the outside, like that kid had worked through something, and it was like, I don't need this from the outside, like I have this thing. And it felt like, oh, this is the caretaker that can care for that child. There was another moment where I was sort of fighting with that like intense sort of depressive energy and like moving my body, and the music got really crazy. There's like they really whip up the music at certain points and then bring it down, and so it's quiet, and then move in this way, like whatever the room feels like it needs. And there was this moment where I like needed protection at this level that was like super intense. And this is sort of one of the most like trippy hallucinogenic things. I like became this like fire ice serpent, where I was like made of like both of these materials, and was like, a serpent with like arms and legs and a head. It was just like, this was like a human formed serpent. And it was just this super powerful, like what I guess I would say like a masculine energy. And it was just like white hot through my whole body. And it was just like strength and power. And I was just like it just felt like I was totally protected in this way. It was like, and they talk about this, there's like a demon came in, and it was just like, I got all the strength from that to show me like that I have that, and I can have that sort of like, if I need that. And it was so powerful to have that sense of like, I have that strength and I have that power. And something I want to mention is they talk a lot about this, that any visions or things that you have in the journey, they say like, if you feel like you're dying, you're not, you're having the fear of dying, and you're going through the fear of dying. If you feel like you're going to be eaten by this jaguar, it's not a jaguar that's there, it's the fear of being attacked, or the fear, and that's what's actually occurring. So like, always remember that it's like a dream where it's like all these things happening, etc., but really all those things are yours, they belong to you. So in that experience of having this sort of demon arise, it was like, that was the form that it took, that suddenly I felt this incredibly empowered, almost cosmically protected experience. So that was that night. But again, I went to bed thinking like, something's really wrong here. Like this weekend was like good, but I don't think it was good. I think it was bad actually. And like, it was very interesting because I could see these moments that I had, like these incredible like epiphany, like connections with, whatever spirits or God or myself or whatever you want to call it. And there's just these huge senses of connection, these moments of like laughing with such complete freedom. And I was like, but it's bad. And I was like, it's so weird that the signal is so clear and it cuts across every experience that it's bad. But yet I have the memories of these things that were very good. But yet the dominant voice is that it's bad. I don't know what it is, but I went to sleep, and I woke up in the morning like with this sudden revelation, and like all this stuff sort of moved. And like, of course, as soon as I had this revelation, I had like a big burp, which is like one of the kind of sort of purges. But it was like my system suddenly moved things around, and I like had this purge and had this big revelation. And the revelation was that the voice that was clearly cutting across everything, I was like, that's what was so amazing in the morning. I was like, this voice can just cut through any experience. It's like, it's really, really good at being heard. And I was like, and it just like clicked, and I was like, oh my God. And I was like, that is the voice of this infant. And all it wanted was to be heard, and it couldn't be heard. It was afraid to be heard. It had this dual thing. I need to be heard, but I can't. It's terrifying if I'm heard or I'm loved or I'm cared for. And when that occurred, it like realigned everything. And I was like, whew, and all the joy and the connection came back. And it was like, that child was heard. I heard it, that it needed to be heard. And I heard it that it was saying that this was bad. And I was like, I didn't say this, that I hear you, but it's like just innate. I was like, oh, I hear you. And it whoosh, clicked, and I went back to this place of being like totally like safe and held and like feeling connected again. So it made me realize that a lot of my, the struggle that I experience and the depression and the sort of like anxiety, etc., is this voice that's like, I need to be heard, and it like doesn't know how, and it like is fighting with the depression. It can't move its body, it can't like express, it can't cry. It's like these different things. And when that occurs, when I'm actually listening to what's happening in my body, I'm listening to what's occurring in my experience, it completely feels safe and feels heard. In this moment, it feels like this same entity is with me, the same kind, compassionate, sort of like trusting being is here. And it's like, I can feel its guidance. And this sounds totally wackadoo. I'm not like a big, sky beam, moonbeams and crystals person. And it really is this sense of like, oh, like if I think about judging people, I'm like this feeling of like connectedness goes down. And if I like let go of that, and I think about like, oh, I like helping people and supporting and the kindness, it goes up, and I'm like, it feels really good. And maybe this is just a normal human attachment sort of system realigning in a way that's very positive. But what it feels like is, it's like I can tell when I'm moving away from it and when I'm moving towards it physically. I can viscerally feel this, and it's very palpable and powerful, and is very impactful, and it feels like something I can rely on. It feels like a safe way of being. And so the meditation we guided earlier is based on that. If you're watching this in replay, the meditation will be linked somewhere down below or popping up here someplace. So if you want to try the meditation without having to go through a whole weekend of ayahuasca, that's that. Okay, so finally, do I suggest other people do this? The answer is neutral. I do not suggest you do this. I do not suggest that you don't do this. I think it's irresponsible of people to be like, go ahead, go do this, because you really have to sort of, in a sense, be ready for it. But in a sense, it's like to know that, it's time, and whatever that means for you. I know that sounds a little vague. You also want to be sure that you have all the safety precautions in place. I think it's counterindicated if you have certain heart conditions. It's counterindicated like for different things. So you want to make sure that you have, talk to somebody who is a specialist and can tell you, is your body okay in this place? Psychically, mentally, you want to have a little bit of fortitude. My experience was that when I needed gentleness, it became very gentle, which was very helpful. It was not just like at an 11 the whole time. It was like, it would respond actually to what was needed at any given time. I did, however, need to know what I needed, and I needed to ask for that. That was part of the thing. If I just went in there like, I don't know, I don't know what would happen, but I was very clear at the beginning. I was like, I just need gentleness. And it wasn't like a thought like I'm scared and maybe that would be good. It was like I knew in my heart, it's like I need just gentleness. Like, will you show me that? That's what it did. So if you're interested in, exploring this thing, the tradition that I did this in, it was the Shipibo tradition, which is in Peru. You can look that up. I don't know if it's easy enough to look up if you wanted to go there. Something someone suggested to me, if person is interested in this kind of thing, is to get involved in your local sort of psychedelic community, which they have meetups and different things, and just start talking to people and plan on, like, if you want to do this, it's not next month, it's going to be in 6 months or whatever, because you have to make relationships, you have to plan, etc. It's not a thing that happens overnight, because you want really, really, really good guidance, and you want really kind, supportive people who are willing to, be there for you. You want to find someone who's really good at this. Do not pick someone who's like, yeah, I've done this, a dozen times or something like that. You want someone who's like, life is dedicated to this, and they have done it so many times, and ideally they've gone to the jungle many, many times. That's like the term they use. Like, you've done this in situation many, many times. If you can find someone that has live music rather than recorded music, I think that would probably be pretty impactful, although, I'm sure it can work with recorded music as well. That's my general report. I would love to hear your questions. So if you're watching this on replay, if you're watching the video of this, let me do that again. I would love to hear your questions. So if you're watching the video of this, leave your questions down below and I will answer them. If you're watching this now in the live stream, please hit me with your questions now. I'd love to hear any questions or comments or thoughts on anything I've said. It's very nice to have a feedback loop and feel like I'm not just talking to the dead glassy eye of a camera. Anything else I need to say? No, if I need to say anything else in the video, I'll just record it later. Okay, so folks, that's my full report. Hit me with questions, comments, queries, challenges, or concerns. I have 8 minutes until I have a student. Hit me. Let me turn the chat back on. Actually, I'm going to have the chat off on the screen, but I'm going to be reading it. So hit me with any questions that you have, if you have any. Was that fun to hear? Was it boring? Would you prefer I never do it again? Here we go. Cat letterbox. I was going to say cattle letterbox. Cat letterbox. Says, thank you for being so open and sharing your very personal experience. No problem. It was, I think it's because of this work and because of, a lot of the work that I've done over time. It's much easier to talk about my experience. And a few people have pointed out that I'm male presenting, identify as genderqueer, but I'm male presenting, and there's not a big culture of men speaking openly about their emotions in the world. And so just sharing about my experience, therapy, these different, trauma traditions that I've worked through, etc., people say that's a big gift. So awesome. I'm glad that that's helpful for folks. Spotter all sounds amazing, and I want to do it for sure. Cool. Well, if that's where you want to go, then I support that. Cool KLM 121 says, you said you lost something very important to you during COVID. I'm sorry for your loss. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you very much. Yeah, that was my relationship. that was my marriage. We were best friends for 9 years, not best friends. That's not totally, I said that wrong. We were good friends for 9 years in a group of people. We were together for 7 years in a very committed, very like involved relationship. Our businesses were fully intertwined. And then we were married for 6 months, and then it collapsed. So, mourning that. Aaron B. says, is it possible to draw comparisons between ayahuasca and stream entry? Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. You can always draw comparisons. So let me do this. Okay, this is good. I want to include this in the video. So I'm going to do this, talking to the camera. Aaron B. So Aaron B47 asks, can you draw conclusions or comparisons between the ayahuasca experience and the early stages of classical awakening, sometimes called stream entry? You can definitely draw these comparisons, but I think a better model is to talk about is the sort of loosening of experience, which is required in order to get to the early stages of awakening, and is what this experience really is about, is this opening up and the sort of loosening of the bounds of our needs to like sort of control and experience the world. Now, you can experience stream entry without ever doing any of this psychological work, but I promise you, and this is my experience, like after stream entry, the only thing left is like all of this work, right? Of course, there's plenty of space to go in the awakening process, but it becomes real clear that this is what's there. And for many years, I've been working on all this psychological stuff using insight traditions and using the same sort of material that I moved through the process of stream entry with in order to work with this psychological material. And it's only in the last 5 years that I really started to hone like what really works for me, and then like how to work with that. So my big emphasis on working that material through to move forward on any path and to really have fulfillment right now. I mean, this is for me, and I'm not suggesting anyone else use this, is on one hand, IFS is the big side, right? Or maybe we'd do three hands. Like on one side there's IFS, in the middle there's like meditation, which is the, okay, I'm going to frame this differently. Okay. So, oh wow, these really, they meld together. So there's this Venn diagram that I can't even figure out like who's on the outside, like which one's in the middle, but they really overlap a lot. So IFS is a way to work with our psychological material that relies on transcendent material, right? The transcendent stuff is a way to not just move to a transcendent place, but to move to that place and ideally use that as leverage to have a better life, right? The real deep side of awakening is where we loop that back into our lives, and it's part of the fabric of our lives. It's part of the way we are in the world, the way we care for people, the way we interact. So there's this loop in this relationship between transcendent and mundane. It has both. It's really what I think of as an ideal approach to awakening. And then the sort of psychedelic material, and in particular right now I'm very enamored with the ayahuasca side of things, has this very real relationship between the transcendent material and our mundane material, the relationship between those two, and seeing that the transcendent material and the sort of awake awareness part of the mind is freeing, and if we process our experience through that, it is just deeply, deeply freeing. And when we don't do that, we feel isolated and sort of in pain and suffering. All of these kind of have this same ordering structure in my experience. So that's the connection there. Of course, I'm not a good test case because I do all of these things together. So of course they seem very aligned, but they seem very clearly aligned in this way that I think is very significant, this relationship between transcendent and sort of non-transcendent material, and actually seeing that it's the same channel, it's the same material. And I think each of these things, IFS, internal family systems therapy, the awakening-based practices, and the sort of psychedelic material all actually do those things together. Did that answer the question? Okay, folks, so I have just a couple minutes. I'm going to be late for someone if I don't jump right off here. Let me make sure that's correct. Oh my God. Oh, I got to go, guys. That is not ideal. Okay. Got to go. Folks, I love you. Great to be here with you. Hit me up with any questions, comments, queries, challenges, or life concerns. We're going to be back here in fewer than 48 hours, and I'm very excited that we get to hang out together again soon. Let's put the outro on. I got to go. Mwah. Bye, guys. And in this moment, take a minute to zoom out to that beautiful spacious, kind awareness, and recognize that this moment is a great one to teach us how to practice in every aspect of our life. As always, folks, practice well, take care of each other, have fun, and we'll see you all very, very soon.